Well, going through those list of responses, I would start with A and say, I'll have to check with your daughter to make sure it's okay for me to discuss her grades with you. That's a possible answer in that if you are going to disclose information from a student education record, you have to have the student's consent to do that. However, if you were to call the daughter and say, can I talk to your parents, and she said yes over the phone, that would not be sufficient for consent. And the incoming freshmen are all asked to sign a consent form here at Vanderbilt, which authorizes the school to discuss student information with parents, but it certainly does not say that we must do that. So I would not necessarily take the approach of A, and I think I'll get to another possible solution at the end of this. But A is not a bad answer, but if you do go down that path, the consent has to be in writing. But I think we'll have a better solution at the end of these options here. B, I'm not at liberty to share that information. I encourage you to discuss this with your daughter. That's also another possible answer, and it's actually a really good answer, generally speaking. FERPA tries to get us out of the middle of these conversations, and really it's helpful for the parent and the student to discuss. However, at Vanderbilt, many of our freshmen do come in with a signed consent form, so if the parent knows that, that might not be a good answer from their perspective. And we'll talk about what is maybe a better answer when we get through the first four options here. So C, your daughter is an adult now and her grades are really none of your business. Goodbye. Not the most customer-friendly or parent-friendly response you could provide, so I'm not sure I would use that language. D, unfortunately, your daughter is doing poorly. She got a D on the first test and an F on the second. That is a FERPA violation if the student has not signed consent. So if you don't know whether or not the student has signed consent, that's a very dangerous thing to say, and I would absolutely advise against option D as an answer. I would maybe argue for an option E approach. So when Vanderbilt freshmen come into Vanderbilt, they are asked by their school to sign a consent form. And that form basically says, are you a dependent of your parents? And if you are, may we speak to your parents about your education record? A good percentage of our students do sign that form. But what I would advise is that if I were in this situation, I would refer the parent to the school's dean's office. And then the associate dean can make the determination if it's appropriate to speak to the parent or not. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. But I would really advocate that determination be made by the associate dean. One thing that I would really emphasize as it relates to FERPA, even if we are allowed to release something, it does not mean that we have to. FERPA says we may release. And the purpose of the consent form for us here at Vanderbilt is to allow an associate dean to take a look at the situation and determine whether or not it is appropriate. So my advice would be allow that process to happen through the dean's office in your school.